Hello, and welcome to Fresh Blood, a podcast about killing it after 40, where we prove that new blood does not necessarily equal young blood. Here to discuss what it takes to have continued success through life, I'll be your host, Jolie Downs. With over 20 years of executive recruiting experience, I've learned how much we can grow and be inspired by other people's stories. I'm excited to share that with you here on Fresh Blood. Today, we are speaking with Julia Goldstein. Julia is a former engineer turned professional writer who in her 40s decided to branch out and start her own communications agency, which focuses on serving purpose-driven companies. She has successfully grown and managed her company over the past decade, leading to the launch of 2 published books, Material Value and Rethink the Bins, where she shares her passion for materials and sustainability. Julia is now expanding the offerings of her agency, JLFG Communications, into online courses. She is a lifelong learner that thrives when she pushes her mind and body to new challenges, and I am really looking forward to learning more. Julia, thank you for joining us on Fresh Blood. Please, could you tell us a little bit more about your story?
Sure. As you said, I'm an engineer turned writer. I get to really surprise people that I have this engineering background and I can write.
I love it.
Because people say, wait a minute, that doesn't go together.
Yeah.
But it's possible to have an engineering brain and an artistic brain together.
Yes.
And I've been a lifelong musician. And when I was an undergrad studying engineering, there were a lot of other students there who also played music. And so, I don't know, the writing is part of the, to some degree, creative piece of that, but I'm very analytical. So I'm often writing extremely technical content, but I also like the variety of being able to explain things so that ordinary people without expert knowledge can understand what I'm talking about.
And that's a talent right there to be able to do that. And so how did you come to want to start your own agency?
I've been self-employed for a very long time. Since, let's see, the last time I worked full-time for a company was 1995.
Oh, wow. Okay, tell us about this.
I was working full-time. I had my first child in January of 96, took maternity leave, went back part-time. And then for various reasons, that job just wasn't the right place for me to continue anymore. And I started rethinking what was I going to do. But I'd built up contacts and I started doing contract work. Okay. And that I could do very much part-time, even less of a fewer hours per week than I was doing when I went back to my regular engineering job.
Your contract work was writing focused?
Actually, it was more engineering focused.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, because that's what my background was. Even though I started noticing when I was working as an engineer, I was the one writing the articles for publication in trade magazines. Mm-hmm. Even when I go back to looking at when I was in college, and we had a thing called Engineering Clinic, where small teams of students did projects for companies, kind of a capstone project.
I love those things. They're great.
Yes. And I did one that involved computer programming because I didn't like programming. I was scared of it. And I said, I'm going to do a programming related clinic. But honestly, my teammates did most of the coding. And I was the team leader. I was the one who was the liaison with the person at the company, our contact there. And I was the one who wrote most of our final report to the client.
Even then for you?
Even then, it seemed like a natural fit. Mm-hmm. Now, about 20 years ago, I was doing again, a contract project, and it was starting to get into more of a project management type of role. And I was going to need to spend more hours on site per week than was really going to work out very well for my life balance. I had 2 young children at the time. I needed something with more flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought back to the writing. I was looking for an option with more flexibility where I wouldn't need to be on site all the time. And I thought back to the writing that I'd done. I reached out to a contact at a trade magazine, one where I had written an article as an engineer, and the timing worked out, and they were looking for a technical editor. So I was the Silicon Valley office.
This is great. So you found yourself in a position that you had 2 young children. What you were doing wasn't quite working for you. You wanted to find more flexibility. And so you took the time to evaluate your skill set, what you had going on, what could be a possibility. You reached out to a connection and you found a new avenue for yourself. Is this correct?
Yes, it is.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So please go on. Tell what happened from there.
I continued doing writing for that magazine for probably about 8 years. And it was on and off. When you were mentioning downturns earlier, when the downturn at the end of 2001 happened and into 2002, we had just bought a house.
Oh, yes.
Again, I still had the young kids. So the fact that the contract work slowed down then was actually okay.
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot going on, and I had the luxury, and I have for decades now, of a husband who works full-time at a job with benefits. And not everybody has that. So going out on your own where you don't know what the income's going to look like. It's not a steady paycheck. Some months you might have loads of projects and lots of income coming in, and some months you might have none.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be able to handle that. And I've been in a fortunate position that I have been able to handle that. So in late 2001, 2002, when things were slow for I don't know how many months, I could cope with that, and eventually they picked up.
Yeah. How did you deal with it emotionally and professionally? What did you do during that time? When you're in your own business and you go through a downturn, even if you have a husband who is bringing home a paycheck with benefits, that gives you a huge comfort level by far. But you do still have to deal with the emotional aspect of going through that process and the professional thought process too. What do you do during that time to put yourself in the best position? And I'm curious how you dealt with it during that downturn.
Yes. I didn't really consider myself a business owner at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I filed a Schedule C because I was an independent contractor, but it was really very much part-time. So in some ways, I didn't feel like I had a real career.
Mm-hmm.
And that did bother me because I'm someone who wants to accomplish things. I'm driven to achieve stuff. And I wasn't really. I definitely had plenty to do with managing just all the day-to-day activities, but I didn't want to only be at home with my children. I wanted to eventually do more. So I guess during that point, I was waiting it out.
Mm-hmm.
And the projects eventually came back. I do remember feeling glad I wasn't an employee because if I had been, I probably would have been laid off.
Mm-hmm.
But because I was on contract, it didn't cost them anything to keep my name on the masthead. And they could just wait to give me work until things picked up again.
Very true. It is the best thing that people can do when laid off during downturns is to freelance until they can find that next right thing.
Yeah, so sometimes contract work can give you that opportunity,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't always come. So you can't necessarily count on it.
No, no. So when things came back and started, when did you decide to start doing it more full time?
That didn't come until much later.
Mm-hmm.
Now, an interesting thing that I also did was I started teaching music. There was
Okay.
a program called Music for Minors where they're looking for volunteer music docents to teach in elementary school classrooms. And my kids' school, one of the budget cut items that had
Music.
happened in schools all over California was that music and art were getting
Yeah. I was horrified when I found
they were getting the cuts. And even back when I was in high school and I went to say, "Oh, can I go and volunteer to teach music at the elementary schools?" And they said, "I'm sorry, we cut our programs."
Yeah.
And that was even back in the 80s. So I thought, well, I've been a musician since I was 7 years old, but I don't know how to teach music. And then I found out about this program and they had a whole training class. And I said, okay, sign me up. And I started the program at my kid's school.
Oh, that's great.
The program had been existing for a while, but I said, let's pilot it for first grade because I had a first grader.
Mm-hmm. I love it.
So that was, again, I always feel like I needed to contribute in some way. And I wasn't getting paid to do that, but I feel like I was doing something valuable and it was fun singing and dancing with the first and
Oh,
second
yeah.
graders and teaching them music concepts.
Oh, yeah. No, and that's so important for them. Not only that, but what wonderful memories for yourself too.
Yeah, and it even led to some paid work teaching music.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Now, I was paid as a substitute teacher, so the pay was very dismal. Nobody could make a living as a
Yeah.
substitute teacher.
But you weren't doing it for the pay anyway. So that was
No, but it was gratifying that my experience doing it on a volunteer level
turned
had
into
gotten places to reach out and recommend me to
that.
teach.
That is very satisfying. And doing that while you were consulting, basically.
Yes, while I was still doing the writing for the magazine as needed. And then the magazine went under in
As many have.
2009. Again, another downturn, but that one, the publishing industry was not what it had been a decade earlier. This is not news to anybody. Everything was going online. I would sometimes be asked to write a piece and they'd say, okay, for the print magazine, you have 400 words because they could only print as many pages as they could based on how much advertising they got.
Oh, wow.
But online, they said, oh, you can expand it. You can write 1,000 words or however long you think it needs online. But again, the magazine went under. So that dried up and I started thinking, what's next? Am I really going to try to make a career of teaching music? No. I wanted to go back to the writing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had talked to a contact who did marketing writing for companies. And I thought about doing that. And that's how I really began delving into the idea of the current version for my business.
And basically it formed in that second downturn, essentially.
It was actually 2011.
Oh,
So the other
2011.
thing I did in 2010 is I decided to go back to school.
Oh, good for you. What did you go back to school for?
I went to my local community college and got a certificate in business leadership.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I hadn't been a student for quite a while at that point.
It's satisfying when you haven't been for a while, isn't it?
Yes, and it was definitely a different experience. There were students who were almost technically they were young enough to be my kids. I was 42 and some of the kids were in the classes were 18, 19. Go ahead.
What was that like for you?
It was definitely a different experience. But I took some evening classes that had a wider range of students of all ages.
Mm-hmm.
Although I also took acting classes for fun.
Oh, that's really fun. I bet that helped in a lot of different ways you probably wouldn't imagine. At least that's what I would imagine.
Yes. It was about being present in the moment.
Mm.
I'm never going to be an actor, but just some of the exercises. And I remember one where it was called crossing a line. And you're working with one other partner, and the idea is to convince them to cross over this imaginary line on the floor because what you have to offer is something compelling to them.
That's a good exercise right there.
Absolutely.
Gosh, we should all be working on that exercise.
Yeah.
I'm right now, I'm mentally applying it to my business.
Yeah, there are things definitely that you can apply to business. And one of the other classes I took, which was called Human Relations in Business, which was super valuable. A lot of the things that the instructor was saying seem perhaps obvious, act like other people matter, but something about just the way it was done, it made me shift along my thinking and realizing that especially early in my career, some of the ways I was interacting with other people were not really helping me.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed that a lot of times think that even though things are obvious, sometimes they're so obvious that we stop recognizing them and we stop bringing awareness to our own actions and what's happening. So it becomes less obvious. And all it needs is someone pointing it out. And all of a sudden you're able to see it all over the place. And you just wonder how you missed it.
Yes. The advice, seek to understand, then to be understood.
Well, that's good. That's what we all need right now.
And I've heard variations of that from many different people over the last decade.
It's a needed motto for right now, I would say, in our culture. So in 2011 is when you really started building your communications consultancy. And
yes.
And so you started building that. And I know you've written a couple of books in between there. What was your motivation for your books?
That happened later. That happened after my company was already going.
Mm-hmm. So you got that established firmly and then started looking at the next challenge.
Yes. I had for a while thought, I'm a writer. I should have written a book by now. It was the beginning of 2017. And I was recovering from having the flu. And so I was resting a lot and I was thinking. And that was honestly the point where I decided I was going to really write a book. It was going to be about materials and sustainability. Because I've been fascinated with materials like plastics and metals ever since college, where I took a material science course that inspired me to go to grad school in material science. But I also wanted ideally to shift my client base toward companies that I thought were really making a positive difference in the world.
I like that.
And I thought, if I get this book out there, that can help bridge. That can help me build a bridge that'll allow me to reach companies, that'll give me credibility in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Because I would attend conferences and feel like everybody's either been doing sustainability since the 70s, right? If they're a generation older than I am, or they're young people who got degrees in sustainability related fields that didn't even exist when I was in college. Because in the 80s, that was just not what was going on in this world.
No.
At least not in this country.
No.
So I wanted to reimagine my brand so that I could be really writing for those companies where I really wanted to help amplify their message.
Really smart.
I enjoyed the work I was doing for the companies that I was writing for, but some of them I wouldn't be so proud to mention out loud. And I won't name any names.
So now, do you work with companies that you're only proud of mentioning out loud?
I'd like to say I'm 100% there. There's none that I feel really that I would not want to be connected with.
Yeah.
A lot of the stuff I write is behind the scenes. And so I'm not really going to say, oh, I write for this company or that company, or, oh, that article that it says the CEO wrote. No, that was me.
Yeah. It's not part of your job description to share that.
No, the stuff that has bylines, though, it's interesting. And that's another thing that I've done, because I've worked doing some contract work for magazines, because it's helpful to have bylines that have my name out there. And there was one I was doing for Screen Printing Magazine, and they suggested a topic. I shifted it. I said, could we look at sustainability issues in the screen printing industry? That I'd really want to write. And they said yes. And they pointed me to some companies to interview.
How long did it take you to write the book?
I started the research in early 2017. And I had a self-edited draft ready for the copy editor in November of 2018.
Wow, that's really good.
Now, I did use content from blog posts because I'd started a blog in 2015. Again, that was another thing. Oh, I don't have a blog? I should have a blog. What writer doesn't have a blog? So I started that in 2015. And so I did find stories from there that made sense to include in the book. Again, the interviews that I did with 24 business owners, consultants, executives, those took place in 2017 and 2018. And then because I chose to self-publish, and that's another whole lengthy discussion, the short answer to that is I didn't have a platform, and I could have gone and written proposals and tried to get them accepted. But this way I had control over the creative process and could make the whole thing happen a lot quicker.
Yeah.
So the book came out in April 2019.
That's great.
And I know if people don't know the timeline of books, from sending it to a copy editor in November to having it out and published in April with endorsements is fast.
It's very fast. Yes. No, it's very impressive. I love how you were able to make that happen. Well, and I love that you had that revelation to yourself as you were recovering from the flu that you are a writer, and as a writer you should have books, and then you just decided I'm going to write a book, and then you did. That's exactly how it should work. You know,
it didn't happen instantly, but there were all these different points along the way where I said, okay, well, I've done this much. Now it's going to happen.
Yeah.
And somebody at one point said, you said publicly that you were going to write a book. I said, I did. And they said, yes, you posted something on LinkedIn.
I am writing a book. Well, I'm enjoying your story, Julia, and I love that you were able to, you made things work for yourself when you had young children. You were able to be home with them, work for yourself. From there, you expanded and grew a company. Then once that was good, you challenged yourself to write a book, and then you wrote a second book, and now you're expanding into online courses, which I'm curious about hearing about. But I'm curious because everyone has a different definition of success, and so I'm curious what your definition of success is, and then also what you feel is one of your greatest successes in life, and what you learned from it.
Yeah, there are these conventional ideas of success that I guess you're supposed to make a certain amount of money or have a certain title. And sometimes I feel like I've fallen down in that. But then I have made things happen.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think, what do I want to achieve with this? Ideally, I want to reach people with a message. And I can do that through books.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, oh, my friends are going to buy my book because I wrote it. It's people I have never met are saying, oh, you've got to read this book. Or this inspired me to suddenly change my habits and buy reusable this, that, or the other.
Isn't that amazing too?
And with this second book, which just came out at the end of November.
Congratulations.
Thanks. It's a practical guide aimed at individuals.
This is the book Rethink the Bins, correct?
Yes.
So this helps the common household with their recycling ideas and how to be more sustainable.
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Giving practical advice saying, here's what happens when the stuff leaves your curb or the building behind your apartment. Here's why recycling is such a challenge. And here's some steps you can take to try to make it work better. And I talk about composting also. And that people can take away practical tips. And I think, wow, I need to sell thousands of copies of this book. Not to make back the money that I've invested in it. That's helpful too, of course, but to share the message and say, if thousands or even millions of people start doing this, we can actually make a difference. Yeah. And it's not, oh, better recycling is going to save the world. But I do have an opportunity. And then I realize, oh, advocacy, and what else should I do? And how else can I make a difference in the world? And that's part of what I can also do through my work with companies. Because I think that the business world needs to be 100% behind addressing climate change and use of resources. And environmental issues can't be just separate from the financial reality of business.
No.
So if I can make little bits of progress by putting ideas out there, then to me, that's success.
I agree. I completely agree. That's what it's success. It's accomplishing what you set out to do. Whatever that might be, whatever that looks like to you, whatever that life looks like to you. And that's what I see you doing, is creating the life that you want and that works for you, and impacting the people in the ways that are important to you. And I know that, okay, change recycling. You made a comment, oh, it's not change the world. But if we all make these it's those small changes. And the small change here, maybe me making that small change isn't going to change the world. But when you put something out like that helps people on a grander scale make those smaller changes, and those smaller changes begin to add up, and it can have a massively impactful way on the world. So it is a very powerful thing what you're doing, and inspiring. And honestly, we all need to be talking about recycling. Our recycling is in horrible danger of the whole field of failing. So we all need to be smarter and better about our own personal impact on this world. So I commend you for what you're doing. I find that the challenges in life and the obstacles and the failures are really where there's so much learning that's happening. Can you tell us about a time that you failed at something or had a very big obstacle or challenge and how you overcame it and what you learned from it?
Yes, I will tell a story that I don't always tell about my decision to not continue teaching music and to go back to the writing.
Okay, I love that.
I actually got fired from a teaching position.
So that's so hard when that happens.
It was very distressing.
So many emotions, right?
Yes, I was teaching an extraordinarily challenging class of fourth graders. My sweet spot was first and second graders. They're adorable. They're old enough that you can teach them concepts, but they're young enough that they're not talking back at you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's a big difference.
Disrespecting you.
Yes.
The way these fourth graders did. And when you have a certain number of kids in a class that kind of get together and have that attitude,
mm-hmm.
It's tough.
Yes,
and maybe I didn't handle it the best way. But when the principal suddenly came and told me I was fired and I had to leave, oh my goodness, I wasn't sure what I was going to do next. And I sank into a bit of depression. And part of what brought me out of it was running.
Mm.
So here I was in my 40s. I had never been an athlete ever in my life. And I decided to sign up for a triathlon training class at the Y.
Wow.
Because, well, this was one time, one of my sons was in a swim class and I was swimming laps during his class. And then for some reason I ran a mile afterwards and I thought, wait, I like to bicycle. I wonder what's the shortest possible triathlon out there and could I finish it?
Oh, wow.
And right about that time, I was a member of the Y. That's where my son was taking swimming. I saw a sign that said triathlon training class, $100. Like, let me see, could I do it? And I talked to the director and she said, sure, you can do this. I did complete my first sprint triathlon that year. It was a 1/4-mile swim, about a 10-mile bike ride, and a 2.5-mile run. So in triathlon terms, that's very short.
In my terms, that's amazing.
It was an all-women's triathlon, which is great. And I didn't finish last.
The fact that you finished, that you just went and did that, Julia, I think is amazing. And what a great way to change what's going on in your head, because that is, I talk to people all the time who may have been fired or laid off for various reasons. It's a very difficult emotional place to be. It just brings up all kinds of negative emotions inside yourself, and it triggers different things in different people. But for almost everybody, it definitely causes a dip, and you have to get yourself out of it. You have to get yourself out of your head, basically.
It's tough because when I got fired, it was like I had failed, and I'm not the kind of person who fails at things.
Yeah.
But
what did you learn
I had
from
to
it?
move on, and going back to doing the writing was what made sense. And I've had other times when I've thought I have a contract and then they go silent and I don't know why. But none of those have been crushing or anything. It's just, okay, they probably should have said something, but people do that and I'll move on. And for whatever reason, they're not going to hire me and there's other projects.
You just keep going. Just keep trucking through. That's really the bottom line in life. For continued success, when you hit a dip, just keep going.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Or sometimes change course.
Yeah, it's a matter of taking some stock and realizing what is right for you. And I know we've all had those points in life, and we have to evaluate. And I think the knowing your why really helps with that on if you should change your course or keep going. And because a lot of times what I find is it's very hard for people to make that decision, which direction. So when you were sitting there, was it easy? Was it an easy one for you to decide to change your direction and go to the writing, or did you have any struggle there?
I first had to find my way out of my hole, but then say, yes, this particular class was a challenge, but I don't want to be teaching fourth and fifth graders. And yes, I could still keep focusing on the younger kids, but honestly, that's not where my greatest talents and interests lie. I really want to work with adults most of the time. Not that I don't like kids, of course, but
we all work better with different.
yeah, I decided in my professional life, I wanted to, again, go back to the writing and see where that took me.
Now, with your current company, you said that you were looking to expand into new services. So, can you tell us a little bit about the success that you've seen with your work and what you're planning on doing in the future?
Sure. I've been thinking about what's the next step because I've often thought I can do more than just write content. That's a valuable service, but I have had that drive to teach for a long time. Even back in 1990, I remember when I was thinking of leaving school with a master's and not getting a PhD, I thought, oh, maybe I could teach community college because you don't need a PhD for that. But then I thought, what would I teach? They don't have material science departments in community colleges. And then I'm trying to remember when it was. It might have been around 2010 when I was trying to figure out what direction my career was going to go next. And I thought about corporate training because I could come into companies. And even in one of the engineering projects that I did when I was doing contract engineering in the late 90s, I went in and did a training course on how to use a particular piece of equipment. I did a whole day-long training session. And now everything's going online, especially this year. And there's a boom in online courses.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, oh, that seems like the next logical step. And I'd been teaching workshops. I'd been giving workshops on recycling. And some of the reception to those is what convinced me that my next book needed to be a consumer guide. But I thought related to my work, I see, oh, there's an opportunity to teach companies some of what I do to help them better understand what types of content they need and to get everybody on their team bought in to why they're creating it and how they can make it happen more smoothly.
Awesome. It's really smart, and you can impact so many more by doing the online courses as well. And you already have, sounds like you already have the content if you've been doing the workshops. So that's a really smart idea.
Yeah. So just again, starting with individual training sessions to say, here's what a white paper is. Here's what it can do for you and your company and help you. Here's how it can help you spread your message. And here's what it should entail. And here's some of the other types of content that you can create in addition to or instead of a white paper. But also looking into training on some of the sustainability piece of it. In what can they do to address waste, especially in their industry. Mm-hmm. So I think that there's a lot of different directions. And I'm actually about to attend a multi-day workshop where I'm going to be really trying to figure out my strategic plan for what direction I want to go and what different types of courses I want to offer.
That's great. Outline it all out.
Yes, Because I think a lot of times I tend to go from contract to contract, and depending on how much work I have at any given time, my sense about what I should do with my business changes.
I was reflecting on the fact that you've gone through a lot of different changes throughout the years, with starting as a career woman, and then you have a family and managing career with family, and then you started your own company, you've written books. So there's been a lot of different transitions that you've had in life. And I'm curious because right now is a time when there are a lot of people who are in a transition, if you will, whether because they were forced into it because of COVID, or because of COVID, now they're reevaluating. I'm just wondering if you have any best advice that you would give someone who's in the second half of their life, who might be struggling a little bit to figure out what is the right next step for me right now.
I think that by the time you've got a few decades of life experience, you might know more about yourself than you realize. So I think looking back, and sometimes you can even look back to childhood, not like when you were a really young kid, but maybe even teenage years or young adulthood, but really thinking to what kind of work were you doing when you really felt most engaged and like you were just driven to make it happen. And I know some people have different financial pressures that they've got to look at the reality of it. But I think a lot of us, especially over the age of 50, where you say, maybe now I've got the luxury to say, if I don't have to make a certain amount of money every year or every month, what would I really want to be doing? And I recognize that many people are not even in the position to have the luxury to make those kind of decisions.
They need to be asking themselves the questions.
But if you are, yeah. And honestly, the money might come.
Mm-hmm.
If you can afford to be a little bit patient.
Well, and you can't reach any goal that you're not aware of either. So your advice is really spot on to do that evaluation, to look back and figure out what is that dormant pleasure or dormant talent or the thing that engaged me the most, and with that.
And there's lots of tools. There's personality tests. A lot of people have pointed me to Strength Finder. You can do some of these surveys that suggest what type of work or what kind of direction you might want to take. And those could be helpful. But I think, I don't know, sometimes we tend to answer those in a certain way that might actually not really be how we feel and might not really be based on what we've done in past experience. Because we maybe, I don't know, sometimes we have a vision of, I think I should be this kind of person.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you really look back at what have you been doing the last 5, 10, 20, 30 years, I don't know, a light bulb might go off.
Mm-hmm. I agree. It's interesting when you look at your own life that, writing, you were studied to be an engineer, but writing was popping up early on. You were an engineer, but after you had children, basically other things pushed you in the direction to writing. And then you become a writer, and then you become a writer around sustainability and recycling, these topics that you're passionate about. And then you end up writing a book. And then you're going to do an online course, which incorporates the teaching that you did on the side there with music teaching. So it just, your own story seems to have picked up all the little pieces, and they're all just putting them all together right now into the big mosaic.
Yeah. It's not been a straightforward path, but I don't think I'm the only one. And in fact, I know I'm not.
No,
and I remember at my, I think it was either the 20 or the 25-year college reunion where we went around the table. Okay, who is doing exactly what their college major would suggest? And we're at a college, we had 4 different majors: math, physics, chemistry, engineering. That was it. So we were all technical kind of people. And there was the one person at the table who got a physics degree, got a PhD in physics, and has been a physics professor for the past umpteen years. But he was the exception. Most of us had done a lot of disparate things in our careers. And we would go on to make even other different changes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I find that to be completely true myself. We're all on our own paths, and I find that some people have very straight paths that they're aware of and they follow from the beginning, but most people I have found have had a little bit more of a meandering path that might seem meandering from one view, but when you take a look back, it's very purposeful in ways that you never saw before.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like the universe nudging you in different directions that you didn't realize. But if you look back, you can see it. Just talking to you about your story, I can look back and see it. So it's very interesting. Now, I'm curious, as we talk about looking back, do you have any regrets that you've learned from, I should say?
I guess sometimes I feel like I should have done more earlier. I don't know. I guess I did what I had to do at the time.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a very human feeling. At any point to see a point and think, could I have done more? I don't know if anyone, I don't know. There might be some people out there who look back and never think that, but I think it'd be hard to live. I think that's the goal in life, really, is to live life that way, where you have no regrets. But I've never met someone without a
No. And I have some that I probably won't mention right now.
no.
I
You don't
don't
have
need to tell everybody everything.
no, I have many regrets I don't need to bring up, but but it is what I think is important about regret is learning from it. And what I've learned from my own regret is to make decisions so that I don't have future regret. I think about that a lot. So
Yes. And especially as we grow older, one of the things, it was probably a decade ago, and my mom had some medical scares, and I feel like I disappeared and I didn't give her the support that I should have.
mm,
And now my parents are still alive and they're in their 80s. I appreciate that I still have them around. And that's something that I know many people my age don't have.
yeah, you just hit on my big regret.
And I want to make sure that I let my parents know that I'm here and that I spend time with them. And now that means in their backyard at a distance. But
You do it.
I hope to be able to hug them again.
Yes, I hope so too. I think that's really important. And what you brought up there is a really important thing that people don't always realize. It is something that is taken for granted in life until it's gone. And I was young when my mother passed away, and I didn't fully, I wasn't super young. I was in my early 20s, but I didn't fully grasp that while she was dying of cancer, that she was actually dying, and that it would be, I think it's hard for you as a child to allow yourself to accept that. And I do have a lot of regret because she isn't here for me to make that up. But that regret that I have, I use to motivate me moving forward with other people. And I also talk a lot about with other people because I think it's important for them to hear my regret and my pain and what I wish I could have changed, because my hope is that it motivates them to not have that regret and to not take their parents for granted. And when they are feeling really angry or irritated, to maybe look at me and realize maybe I should just let this go and give them a hug. Because you won't regret that ever. So I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's really important with all loved ones.
Yeah. And also taking care of my health.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes.
And that's and one of the things that I realize that I've got to do, because I am now stuck working at home, from home all the time. I belonged to a co-working space, which was absolutely great because I could interact with real people. But in any case, I have to get outdoors every day,
Yeah.
no matter the weather. And there was a time getting into fall, I live in the Seattle area, and a lot of people up here, they get really down when we start having so few hours of daylight, because it starts looking like it's getting dark at 3:30 in the afternoon almost. I've got to get outdoors in the daylight, no matter how cloudy it is or rainy or whatever. And that's something I need to do for my mental health. And I need to get out and walk and run and do all that stuff so that when I'm in my 80s, I can still do a 5K. It's going to be slower.
I love it.
I want to be out there doing it. I did this one race. It was called a double. You do a 10K and then you have a little break and then you do a 5K. So a total of 9.3 miles. Then they had the award ceremony, and I wasn't going to win an age group award because my age group was way too competitive. It was like, I don't know, whatever age group it was, somewhere in the 40s. There was this woman who was 89 years old. So she got first place in her age group because she was the only one there. She averaged a 14-minute mile.
Oh, my goodness.
She was 89 years old, went 9.3 miles, a combination of walking and running. I thought, okay.
That's amazing.
I want to be able to do that when I'm 89.
I don't think I've done that. I am inspired. I feel a little shame.
We all do what we can. And I have friends who have completed athletic feats that I could never in my lifetime do. And the piece of that is like, oh, wow. Oh, gosh. And then, you know what? That's them. And this is me. And we all have our different levels of what we can accomplish and what's our own best effort. And I think that's the great thing.
I do, but I love these stories. I love hearing about things like that are just so inspiring. It shows us what we're capable of. That's, there's no excuses. At 89, I'm going to go walk 9 miles. Okay. Let me make the goal. I'm going to go do that in the next couple years.
There you go. Yeah. And that's the thing. Setting goals, committing to them, writing them down, telling people, that's part of what makes them actually happen.
100%. And really, Julia, if you drop me off anywhere in Europe, I can easily do 10 miles, no problem. I need the right scenery to keep me going.
Oh, yeah. Scenery. That makes a difference.
Mm-hmm. So, before we go, I appreciate what you were sharing here because you worked from home for many years. Is there any other advice? Because there's so many people now working from home that never have before. Is there any advice you'd give people to successfully work from home before we sign off?
If you haven't figured it out by now, no.
Many haven't.
Yeah. And it also depends on whether you're living all alone or whether you've got family members. Part of it is setting boundaries, making it so you're not just on your computer all day, because if you are working from home, you probably have the kind of job that as long as you have a computer and an internet connection, you can work from anywhere. For me, it's get outdoors every day. And maybe when I get outdoors, I'm running 5 miles. Maybe when you get outdoors, you're just taking a 20-minute walk in your neighborhood. Or maybe you're doing push-ups. I don't know. But getting outdoors and being active to whatever level that means for you every day, I can't imagine who that wouldn't benefit. Just to bring that break in your day. Don't work all night, get enough sleep.
Thank you so much, Julia. I really appreciate you sharing your story. There's so much to learn here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Julia's story is a perfect example of how our lives are rarely a straight path forward. Our journeys are winding, and the things that we learn along the way, they help us create our very best selves. Julia started in science. She found a strength in her writing, eventually shifted into the communications world, and now runs her own agency, becoming an author. Along the way, she has had many experiences that added to the color and depth of her life. She went back to school when she was older after she had kids, which I love. We are never too old to keep learning. We should all keep advancing ourselves at every age, and there are so many ways for us to do this, including the very fine and free library. She also took acting classes, which taught her the ever-important lesson of being present in the moment. We can all learn from doing things that challenge us, helping us bring us into that present moment. The popularity of the mindfulness practice is all about bringing you into the moment, and you can find that same mindfulness by pushing yourself in new ways. When you are actively learning, you will be in that moment. Julia left us with an important thought here too. She said, act like other people matter. Imagine how much the world around you would change by simply acting like other people matter, regardless of how you actually felt. Really think about this. How are you interacting with other people? Is it serving you? Is it making your life easier? Happier? More fulfilling? If the answer is no, perhaps a new tactic is needed. Seek to understand and then to be understood. Or, as quoted in my favorite Ted Lasso scene, be curious, not judgmental. You'll find your life opening up in so many more ways. I appreciated that Julia shared a vulnerable moment with us about being fired. I was fired once in the past, and I can attest that this is a shattering experience. It is a precursor to a variety of negative emotions that can eventually color your world if you let it. There is always a lot to be learned in every experience, and that is first and foremost where your focus needs to be if you find yourself in this situation. What can you learn from the experience about yourself? About your previous work relationships? About your own work or the work of the company? What is it you really want moving forward? What is right for you? What kind of work do you want to be doing? What kind of environment do you want to be working in? If you didn't have to worry about money, what would you be doing to fulfill you? You never know what will come in life, but knowing what you want is the best way to help bring that vision into your life. Write it down. Then take stock of all of your accomplishments. Again, I want you to literally write it down. Make a list of everything that you did, both professionally and personally, what problems you solved, what goals you reached, what makes you you, what are the things that are a natural part of you that you bring forth into the world. Make that list. Feel good about yourself. Grow that feel-good feeling and move on proactively, looking for the opportunity that will make your soul sing. Being fired is an opportunity for something new. The most important thing I learned from my own experience and from the countless candidates I've recruited over the years who have experienced that same punch to the stomach is this. A firing is the universe moving you forward from a situation that was not right for you. You weren't doing anything to change it, so the universe did it for you. Figure out what is right for you and move on. Julia's professional example is one to take note of. She built up her communications practice, focusing in on helping companies make a global impact. In the process, she found her why, the thing that is her passion, inspiring others to be sustainable. She decided to use her skill set, a strength in writing, to start a blog and then write a book to this measure. This gave her the opportunity to use her voice to make a difference and inspire people to be more sustainable. This is also a great professional stacking tool, giving her credibility in her field, boosting her image, and differentiating her from the crowd. This helped her expand into conferences, speaking opportunities, and she's now creating an online course. This is something you can be doing within your own career, regardless of industry as well. How can you expand or up-level your skill set? How can you use what you're doing to help more people? How can you impact the world in a bigger way? Then choose the ways that feel the best for you. Julia also left us with some much important reminders, especially during this time we're living in. Take care of your health. There is no success without your health. This includes your mental health. Make sure you are taking care of yourself in all ways. Eat healthy, get outside, connect with people, connect with nature, be creative, move your body, take good care of yourself, please. Finally, spend time with your parents and your loved ones. You just never know what life will bring. If this past year has taught us anything, it's that every day is precious. Every person is precious. Go give love and gratitude to all the beautiful people in your life. We are so lucky to have each other. I'm wishing everyone a life full of love. Until next time. Thank you for spending time with us on Fresh Blood. If you love this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, or giving us a review. I'm looking forward to connecting with you again on the next episode.